Alright everyone, we start off talking today about the obvious, which is the Derekchauvin verdict, and of course he was convicted on all three counts. Actually, it is honestly a surprise that he got murder too, although I'm a little bit less surprised once I realized the jury hadn't been sequestered. Now, in my naive mind, I had always supposed in any significant case it was automatic that the jury would be sequestered. But then you had Maxine Waters' comments the other day, and I'm like, oh, well, I can put two and two together, and this will definitely be a decision that gets appealed. Not necessarily successfully, though, and I'll explain why. Now, first and foremost, if you're watching this video on YouTube, there will be 4 links in a pinned comment down below, as well as in the description of the video itself. Now, you can join me on other video hosting sites that don't algorithmically demote their content creators, because that's what YouTube has begun to do to literally anyone that doesn't have a corporate contract with at least 5 zeros in it. YouTube is censoring people. There are certain content that I can't talk about on YouTube, so I make exclusives on alt tech sites. I've begun calling them new tech though, because of course they're more than just an alternative to big tech. They're a replacement for big tech at this point. This is a farce. Let's just call it what it is. The jury clearly convicted this man not based on evidence, which we all saw during the actual trial, but based on being threatened. Essentially what this represents, and this is why it'll be appealed, is the jury, which was not sequestered, looking at public opinion, looking at the kind of insinuations and of violence that were being issued by people like Nancy Pelosi, Maxine Waters, and so forth. And Nancy Pelosi's response warrants its own discussion in this video, trust me. They looked at opinion, they looked at the situation for what it really was, and they issued a pragmatic judgment. They didn't issue a judgment that was based on reasonable doubt. They issued a pragmatic judgment. What the jury was essentially told in its non-sequestered state, which is going to lead to appeal, and the judge should have known better and he should be off the bench. What the jury did is they said, we're from this community, or local communities. We're being told, essentially, by hordes of people, tens of thousands of them, and even now by a member of Congress, that the city essentially, and we've watched it for the last year, we're well aware that there have been riots in Kenosha and Portland and elsewhere, that will happen here again, that there will be hundreds of millions in damage done, and that people may die, and that there will be race riots and all sorts of attendant problems, and we'll be reopening a sore wound and letting it bleed even further in our own community, or we can throw one dude under the bus and punt this, and it'll be appealed anyway. I guarantee that the jury was aware of Maxine Waters' comments. That is a guarantee. I guarantee that that was a large factor in why he got anything beyond manslaughter. Honestly, I expected that there would be potentially a manslaughter charge, because they might say, well, there'll probably be riots. We'll give him this lesser charge. He'll probably get out in a couple of years, and he'll be just fine. We'll just do that, and we'll wash our hands of the situation. But if I think my community is going to burn to the ground because a sitting member of Congress is whipping up the flames of insurrection in my community, namely Maxine Waters, I might look askance to having that. Maybe I just say, you know what? We've already had race riots. We've already had, what was it, $1 billion in damage or some crazy amount like that. We have massive amounts of damage. There were attendant injuries, deaths. You've got people shooting at National Guard members and shit because of what Maxine Waters said, for which she should be immediately expelled from Congress, but won't face any consequences, by the way. We can risk all of that, or we can just say, you know what, fuck it. Just this once, not in our community. Fuck it. We're going to let other people deal with the justice system. Let it get overturned at a higher level. Now, it will be appealed, because there is a clear conflict here. Chauvin's Fifth Amendment rights were violated. The jury, for some inexplicable reason, was not commanded to be sequestered during the course of this trial. They should have been sequestered from the moment that it began. They should have not been allowed to leave the building. They should have been sequestered. The judge, I don't know what the fuck is going on in his head that he didn't. They weren't so in other words, they could go on the internet each night. Now, technically they're not supposed to be looking up trial stuff or anything related to it, but looking up reactions to the trial isn't disallowed. And certainly their family and friends. You think they didn't say, oh, did you hear what Maxine Waters said? Here, let me play you the clip on YouTube. Fucking of course they knew. Probably they bring their phone and they show the other jurors, probably. Do they take their phones away? I don't know if that's Apparently, I don't know much about the trial process. I was under the impression that we had a fair court system, at least with regards to sequestration. People are trying to get Trump to talk about the Rittenhouse case, for Christ's sake. You've got Nancy Pelosi, of all people, coming out today, or yesterday rather. Remember, I'm in Amsterdam. It's a different time zone. Coming out and saying, well, thank you, George Floyd, for dying so that we could get justice. Are you goddamn batshit? What justice has been done? You've had dozens of deaths, tens of billions at this point in riot damage all around urban locales in the United States. You've had hundreds of injuries. You are no further in promoting any form of meaningful police reform. What justice? Oh, Derekchauvin's going to be in a cell. He's going to appeal, and here's why it may not be successful. Here's the problem. Let's say you get it before the high court. Number one, they might not take the case. And I say, what are you talking about? You got convicted, fucking deal with it. That's the most likely outcome. Let's say they take it up. The Supreme Court is extremely reluctant to create decisions that will create any long-term binding changes to the legal system. This is by design. Now, sometimes this is a really good thing. Remember with gay marriage? The writing was on the wall long, long ago that gay marriage eventually, because it's a state marriage contract, has nothing to do with religion or ethics or anything, would eventually become the law of the land. The Supreme Court could have decided this years and years before it did, back in the 90s if it had wanted to, because it had cases to take up. They either didn't take them up or they issued extremely lackluster decisions. They did this because they saw the direction in which public opinion was moving, but they also saw that a significant majority of the population, and certainly in the early 2000s at least, was against gay marriage. So they said, you know what? For pragmatic reasons, we're going to take a hands-off approach and let other people reform things. Let the states solve the problem. Let them hammer it out. Once it becomes inevitably clear that gay marriage is going to gain more latitude, more support, and so forth, then we'll issue our decision. Until then, the gay couples can be discriminated against, and it's okay. We'll have reciprocal marriage contracts. So in other words, they would just go, there'd be marriage tourism. It was a boon for Vermont. Vermont almost wishes that the other states had kept it illegal so that gay people would still come and have their weddings in a farmhouse somewhere. It was great for our tourist industry for a number of years, not gonna lie. The Supreme Court is reluctant to issue large-scale decisions. When it does, it's monumental. Gay marriage becoming illegal, after half the states had legalized it. McDonald versus Chicago, stuff like that. They reformed gun laws in the country. What they would probably do is they would find it against Chauvin. Let me explain how they can do this. They would issue a decision and say, we're not overturning the verdict. An opinion piece would be penned by the conservative justices, and it'd probably be along partisan lines, let's face it. We don't want the Supreme Court to be partisan, but they are. Thankfully, generally speaking, they try to at least put it on the back burner in their actual legal decisions, but they issue their opinions. It's not part of the decision, it's an opinion piece on the side. A dissent here, an opinion there, etc. They pen a piece of paper. And they'll say, what Maxine Waters said was disgraceful. She's a bad public servant, she shouldn't have done it, she should be thrown out of Congress or whatever. But we couldn't issue a decision in Chauvin's favor because we couldn't determine that there was any significant proof, again, burden of evidence on here, we couldn't find significant enough evidence, or proof rather, that it influenced the decision. And so they'll punt it too. And they'll issue their decision, and they'll beg the MSM not to report on it too much and cause uproar. Ultimately, at the end of the day, here's the other problem. For Chauvin, for Rittenhouse potentially, for justice in general. Who actually riots and rampages and does violent and despicable things more often? Is it people who are whipped up into a frenzy by the MSM and have Antifa shirts? Or is it a bunch of flag-waving, fucking flannel-wearing conservatives? That's the former. The conservatives very rarely get together. When they do, it is much more impressive, which is why the MSM went completely nuts over the Capitol riot. Or over the Bundy Ranch standoff, which interestingly, again, after charges were levied, they were all dropped because the Bundys did nothing fucking wrong. It's interesting how few people understand that or know the culmination of that case. The same will probably happen to a lot of the people that were just wandering around the Capitol building. Oh, you went in off hours. You can get a tour of the Capitol building under normal circumstances, but it was off hours. It was so you have to pay a fine. That'll be like 99% of the charges, you do realize. To anyone that didn't vandalize anything or attack a cop or whatever. That'll be interesting, but it'll get shoved under the rug and nobody will know what happened, and so they'll still call it an insurrection. Now, this is a farce. Chauvin should have been found not guilty. It is clear based on the evidence that a reasonable person looking at this evidence, I think, would determine there was no evidence that his actions caused the death. George Floyd died essentially when his heart stopped, in part because he was massively overdosing. He was not cooperative. Chauvin didn't shoot him. He didn't beat him to death. This is not a Rodney King-style interaction. He simply leaned on his back. Well, the fact is that George Floyd was complaining of breathing problems minutes before that. Certainly, murder 2 should be immediately thrown out because there was no callousness involved here. Murder 3 is a long shot. Manslaughter, you can say, well, Chauvin knew he was having a medical issue and didn't do anything, but the police, as the jury was told, are legitimately instructed not to give medical aid. They're supposed to just normalize the situation in order to keep the crowd at bay, basically, so paramedics can get through. Well, I mean, manslaughter's a long shot. But I don't expect that the appeal will be successful, the inevitable appeal, in this case, because it will either not get taken up or they'll be reluctant. The Supreme Court will do what the jury did. They'll say, look, we can cause nationwide riots when we reverse this major decision, where there's already tens of thousands of protesters ready to riot at a moment's notice when we achieve our decision, or we can just ignore this. It's only one dude. His life matters less, not in part because he's white, so much as, hey, we can let this dude suffer in jail, or we can let millions of people all over various urban communities suffer when businesses are destroyed, people are assaulted, vehicles are attacked, and property damage numbering potentially in the billions of dollars. Which one of these is the better situation? Well, of course, under the idea of innocent until proven guilty, the rights of the accused, the Fifth Amendment, Derekchauvin was absolutely kangaroo courted. A standing member of Congress basically instructed the jury, you will either find him guilty or we will go crazy and commit violence. This is essentially what they were told. They weren't sequestered. His rights were violated. By the way, this is not a political issue. The Fifth Amendment protects everyone. It doesn't matter what race or gender they are, how old they are, or the circumstances. If you are accused of a crime, you have certain rights, and Derekchauvin's were repeatedly violated. The judge in this case is nuts for not having sequestered the jury. He can come out and blast Maxine Waters' statement all he wants. The jury probably doesn't know he even responded because of the structure of the MSM. Of course, it should be overturned. Will it? I highly doubt so. That's about all. Peace out.